Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
So glad you're with us for the Friday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. And if you thought it was going to be a quiet Friday, boy, were you wrong. Boy, were we wrong. We talked yesterday about how it was possible that something could be happening soon in the Middle East because the U.S. was removing some personnel from a few different countries. Turns out those countries are in the flight line between Israel and Iran, and that's probably why those moves were made. But it still took quite a few people by surprise last night when Israel launched strikes towards Iran. We'll be talking a lot about that in terms of Israel and Iran. We'll also be looking at how President Trump has been handling this to this point and how it should look going forward. And the story that probably would have been our biggest story today had this story not intervened, the dust-up at the Kristi Noem press conference where California Senator Alex Padilla ended up in handcuffs briefly. So a lot to talk about today, and we're glad you're with us. First, we need to talk about BetterHelp. I think the Iranians need some better help in some key positions, but I'm glad they don't have it. But this is an ad for BetterHelp. Men today face immense pressure to perform, to provide, and keep it all together. So it's no wonder that 6 million men in the United States suffer from depression every year, and it's often undiagnosed. But whether you're a guy, whether you're a girl, whether it's just professional, personal, goals unmet, whatever it is, maybe it's time to talk to BetterHelp.
You know, Greg, you were joking, but honestly, the Iranian mullahs probably could get some benefits out of BetterHelp. With more than 35,000 therapists, BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform, having served more than 5 million people all around the world. And it works with an App Store rating of 4.9 out of 5, and that's not based on 1 or 2 reviews. That's based on more than 1.7 million client reviews. And it's convenient because you can join a session with a therapist at the click of a button, which helps you fit therapy into your busy life. And remember, you can switch therapists at any time.
As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Talk it out with BetterHelp. Our listeners at the Three Martini Lunch get 10% off your first month at BetterHelp.com/3ML. That's BetterHelp.com/3ML. All right, Jim, on to our first martini now, and it was around dinner time last night. We had just finished dinner, probably a little bit later than we normally do, and I get an alert on my phone. Israel has launched preemptive attacks against Iran, and so we are not hugely surprised by this. Like I said in the open, this shuffling of diplomatic personnel and other personnel and their families out of the Middle East was kind of an indicator that something was about to happen. And last night, Israel did, in fact, launch strikes aimed at air defense capabilities in Iran. They also took aim, as they usually do, at a number of key officials in Iran. In fact, here is Brett McGurk, who was Joe Biden's lead negotiator on some of this stuff, talking about the toll at the top for the Iranian military and who was successfuli eliminated last night.
The head of their missile and drone program, General Hajizadeh, the head of their National Security Council, Ali Shamkhani, former head but really still acted in that role, and the head of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Hussein Salami, who organizes all the proxy groups across the Middle East, Hezbollah, Hamas, and others through the Quds Force. So incredible. Second point, this shows just total intelligence dominance and penetration by Israel into Iran. And that really limits what Iran can do in response here. The people who would have met this morning to figure out how to respond are all dead.
Yeah, that's a problem. It's a good problem if you're not wanting Iran to have a successful counterattack. They did launch about 100 drones back towards Israel, but apparently all of those were eliminated. So no problems in Israel as far as we can tell. But another massive success from the Mossad here, Jim. It's not even just a bomb in a guest house that takes out Ismail Haniyeh. This time they built an entire drone base that they launched from inside Iran to take out some of these targets. So Iran, of course, vowing revenge. Not sure what they've got left to strike with. I'm sure they will try something. But what do you make of what we saw last night?
You know, Greg, you and I have been doing this podcast for, what are we, 14 years?
Almost 15, yeah.
Almost 15 years. And, you know, long before that, there was kind of this recurring theme in coverage and discussions in the Middle East. Iran is inching towards a nuclear program. We've heard pledges from President George W. Bush, President Barack Obama, President Donald Trump and President Joe Biden, that this was unacceptable, that the U.S. would not accept Iran having a nuclear weapon. And everyone knew that Israel could not accept Iran having a nuclear weapon, that if Iran ever built a nuclear weapon, the odds of them using that weapon were exceptionally high, really almost, some would say almost inevitable. Maybe the short term, maybe the long term, but you couldn't say that the regime that, had paid for and enabled the October 7th attacks, well, they'd never do something as crazy as setting off a nuke. And as I point out in today's Morning Jolt, we all know Israel is small. I looked it up. The acreage of Israel is smaller than that of New Hampshire. When people say, the Iranian nuclear program, it would take them time, they'd only be able to build a few bombs at the first start of the program. Look, if the U.S. were hit with 6 nuclear weapons, it would be terrible. It would be devastating, but the United States of America would go on. You couldn't destroy America with 6 nukes. You could effectively destroy Israel with 6 nukes. Again, we're talking about a space the size, 75% of Israelis live in cities. A huge chunk of them are in Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, and Haifa. There just wouldn't be that much left of Israel if, God forbid, that had ever happened. So Israel could not live with the threat of an Iranian nuclear weapon hanging over its head. And presumably, at least according to Netanyahu's statement, that they reached the point where there was no time left, that basically the Iranians had done everything they needed to assemble a nuclear weapon very quickly. So last night, and clearly was an exceptionally long-planned, probably years in the making operation. They took out not just, as you mentioned, the nuclear scientists, quite a few military bases. The air defenses, apparently in some cases, did not work at all. I don't know whether that's sabotage or just a matter of, you buy Russian air defense systems, you get what you pay for. You get Russian quality control with it when you buy the Russian systems there. And probably most notably, the Iranian nuclear facility, they have like a good couple dozen nuclear facilities spread out across the country, but Natanz is where they have the enrichment facility and is considered one of the most important ones. Something I had found that apparently was reported a couple months ago, that when they were coming up on the 1-year anniversary of when Iran had launched those ballistic missiles at Israel earlier, they put together a promotional video. And the video showed a display of the air defense system operations center outside Natanz. And there were these open source intelligence analysts who looked at it and said, they don't have all of their systems hooked in together. They have multiple monitors separate for each one, and they weren't done. This is based on 2 seconds of footage, but they were able to look it up and then kind of geolocate where all of them were. And they came to it and they concluded the air defenses around Natanz nuclear research facility apparently were not as, they said, more brittle than you might expect, not as redundant and secure as you might have suspect. So now we have to ask ourselves this morning, Greg, was Iran playing brinksmanship, much more vulnerable than it realized, thinking its air defenses would be able to stop any incoming Israeli attacks, and they couldn't? The other thing we've been hearing for years, Greg, was this argument of, well, Israel could strike it, but it would be very hard because they can't refuel their jets over Iranian airspace. According to the IDF, they are refueling their jets over Iranian airspace. One other wrinkle I would throw into this is that, look, Hamas is not what it was because of the Israeli efforts against it. Hezbollah is not what it was because of the Israeli efforts against it. Also, the new regime in Syria is not the warmest and fuzziest towards Israel, but they've made very clear they're not interested in any hostilities against Israel because they're trying to rebuild the country and they don't really have that much of certainly not a coherent functioning army these days. So all these previous threats that Israel faced have been, let's just say, heavily mitigated, if not completely eliminated in the interim. So if you're Israel, this is your opportunity, and you might never get a chance as good as this one ever again.
Yeah, just looking at some of the reports on what's going on here. This is from the Times of Israel in terms of Mossad. The Mossad agents set up a drone base on Iranian soil near Tehran. They were activated overnight, striking surface-to-surface missile launchers aimed at Israel. In addition, vehicles carrying weapons systems were smuggled into Iran. I'd love to see how that happened. Mm-hmm. And these systems took out Iran's air defenses and gave Israeli planes air supremacy and freedom of action over Iran. The third covert effort was Mossad commandos deploying precision missiles near anti-aircraft sites in central Iran. And so just absolute genius again through their intelligence services. For the most part, international reaction is about what you would expect. Weaselly words from British Prime Minister Keir Starmer. He says reports of these strikes are concerning and we urge all parties to step back and reduce tensions urgently. Escalation serves no one in the region. Stability in the Middle East must be a priority, and we are engaging partners to de-escalate. Now's the time for restraint, calm, and a return to diplomacy. So, Jim, that's interesting language, considering the fact that the Brits were among those shooting down the drones. According to one report I saw, Israel, obviously, we were part of that. The UK, Saudi Arabia, interestingly, which put out probably the most unintense condemnation of the attacks you're ever going to see. Azerbaijan, Qatar, Jordan, Turkey, and the UAE. A lot of Muslim countries in there who don't have a lot of sympathy for the Iranians today.
Yeah, I mean, that Saudi, statement of rebuke, it was written on the back of a cocktail napkin, right? And that just really... No, that's not true. I think there are very few people in the region or outside the region. You could almost see, the UK going through the motions. Everyone calm down. Let's not inflame the situation. Well, okay, the situation is literally in flames in many places across Iran, but we don't want to exacerbate tensions in the region. So it's very important, if you're going to launch a strike on a neighbor, stretch before you do it. You don't want to have any stress. You don't want to have any strain on the situation. You want to have good relaxation. Those people probably could use better help, Greg.
They probably could. Yeah, I think that Saudi state reminds me of the Jerry Seinfeld gif of like, oh, that's a shame.
Yeah.
It's just too bad. All right, Hillsdale College. Talk about defending Western civilization. Hillsdale College is all over that with their core curriculum and many other things. And part of the Western ethos, of course, is defending capitalism for your economic system. At many other campuses, certainly in the media, capitalism is the bad guy, and anyone who champions it is the bad guy, unless you know the truth. And Hillsdale College can now tell you the truth about capitalism through their brand new free online course, Understanding Capitalism.
Hillsdale College is now offering more than 40 free online courses. That's right, free. Of course, under capitalism, is anything ever truly free? You can learn about the U.S. Constitution, the stories of the Book of Genesis, the rise and fall of the Roman Republic, or the history of the ancient Christian church with Hillsdale College's free online courses.
Go right now to hillsdale.edu/Martini to enroll in this course, Understanding Capitalism. There's no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/Martini to enroll for free. If you're not already subscribed to the 3 Martini Lunch, please do so at your favorite podcast platform, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, and we're on YouTube. Make sure you do that as well. Jim, now in our second Martini, we're going to take a closer look at how the U.S. handled this situation with Israel and Iran. Obviously, we knew this was coming, which is why we're able to move some of our personnel and dependents. The statements that came out immediately after the news of the attacks from Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, and others was, look, we have nothing to do with this attack. We're aware of it, but we are not facilitating it in any way. So Iran, watch yourself as you try to retaliate here. Don't go after us. You will regret that. And so Trump himself issuing a statement, looks like this morning, a little before 6 o'clock, saying, I gave Iran chance after chance to make a deal. I told them in the strongest of words, just do it. Oh, Nike, nice work. But no matter how hard they tried, no matter how close they got, they just couldn't get it done. I told them it would be much worse than anything they know, anticipated, or were told that the United States makes the best and most lethal military equipment anywhere in the world, by far, and that Israel has a lot of it, with much more to come, and they know how to use it. Certain Iranian hardliners spoke bravely, but they didn't know what was about to happen. They're all dead now, and it will only get worse. There has already been great death and destruction, but there is still time to make this slaughter, with the next already planned attacks being even more brutal, come to an end. Iran must make a deal before there's nothing left and save what was once known as the Iranian Empire. No more death, no more destruction. Then all caps, just do it before it's too late. God bless you all. From President Trump. So
we didn't even get a thank you for your attention to this matter. We got a God bless you all, including you, the Iranian mullahs, and I'm sure they felt that God bless you in their hearts, right? Actually, they felt a bit more like a Nikki Haley, God bless your heart type response. But we'll see how the Iranians respond to this.
No doubt. So, I mean, the president was trying to get a deal. There had been some criticism left and right about the effort to get that deal. He said there's going to be a 60-day window. Yesterday was apparently day 61, so a deal was not done. Iran has now officially walked away from the process, and Trump is clearly making it known, just as the Israelis did last night, this isn't the end of this. This is just the beginning of this. So while Iran is promising to punish us as well as Israelis, what do you make of Trump's strategy here?
Oh, first of all, a little bit of an update at the White House mess. Mr. Ayatollah Khamenei, tacos are off the menu. There's in fact, no chicken at all on this one. Go figure. So sorry. When Rubio issued that statement last night, one of the commentators on CNN was like, oh my God, can you believe the White House put out a statement in this situation and they didn't put any expression of support for Israel? Which is true, and I think it is kind of an observation that the first and most important message that the White House wanted to put out as word of the Israeli airstrikes was breaking is that this isn't us. We are not participating in this. This is not a U.S. attack on Iran. Therefore, there's no justification for an Iranian response against American targets. But then also, like, there certainly was not a, there was no rah-rah, go Israel, comment added to that. Sunrise comes over Washington, and President Trump makes his statements that are much more supportive of Israel. In fact, did a very quick phone interview with Dana Bash and said, "We, of course, support Israel, obviously, and supported it like nobody has ever supported it. Iran should have listened to me when I said, I gave them 60-day warning. Today is day 61. Very, underlining this in red. They should now come to the table, make a deal before it's too late." I heard about this in the corner earlier today. From the very beginning of taking office, the second term, Trump was very clear. He wanted to reach a deal with Iran. And a whole bunch of us were very, very skeptical of this. And as soon as it became clear that Steve, I guess I got snookered by Hamas, Witkoff was in charge of the negotiations, we were even more, unnerved by it. On the other hand, if you're Iran negotiating with Trump, who really wants a deal, and with Witkoff, that's the best deal you're ever going to get. That is the best negotiating circumstances you're ever going to find. And if you can't reach a deal with the Americans, you can't. And I kind of wonder, like the fact that Iran had been so reluctant for this from the beginning, said to me that they are so vehemently opposed to the United States that all of this death to America, you're the great Satan chanting, that's not just for show. It's not just for domestic political purposes, as John Kerry insisted back when he was negotiating the Iran deal. They actually believe this. Or it may well be that the Iranian mullahs have spent 4 decades arguing that America is the great Satan. You can never trust them. We're all evil. We are trying to destroy their values, blah, blah, blah. They couldn't reach a deal with us. They couldn't explain to the public, hey, those people who we said were the epitome of evil and would always stab us in the back? We just signed a deal with them. You're going to love it. That they couldn't. They'd back themselves into a corner. So now, Trump had said, for the entirety of the second term so far, these are my offers. Here's the deal, which is very generous, or here's bombs. You make the choice. And in the end, the mullahs chose bombs.
Yeah, that's basically the case now. And so now that the U.S., to no surprise, is officially, standing with Israel, and like he said, some of the bombs that they dropped on there certainly came from us. What comes next? It seems like most in the region are not exactly upset by this. Iran's pretty cozy with the Chinese. They're pretty cozy with the Russians, who are obviously pretty distracted themselves right now. So how much is our national security at increased risk as a result of the last 24 hours?
Certainly don't want to sound like Tucker Carlson, who said that if anybody took any action against Iran's nuclear program, it's World War III and the end of human life as we know it. That said, Iran is going to respond in some way. Apparently, they already sent 100 drones, and according to the IDF, they were all shot down. I'm looking at someone else who's quoting a senior security official whose most important message was directed to the Israeli public. Quote, "Prepare for Iran's response and don't underestimate what they can do. It will be substantial and lethal." So, yes, it looks like this was a very effective decapitation strike that right now the Iranian government is flailing, but is probably... The Iranian government is not likely to say, oh, well, and go back, suddenly become good guys or reform themselves or something like that. They will probably respond. They will probably respond through terrorist proxies. They have, the statement from the Ayatollah was very clear. They believe we're responsible for this because we support Israel. They don't care that no U.S. forces were involved. By the way, we probably should clarify. The U.S. attitude is we will not help Israel in a direct strike on Iran. If Iran attacks Israel, we will intervene to shoot down those drones, shoot down those missiles, and to shoot down their aircraft and any other targets and stuff like that. So the U.S. is willing to defend Israel. It is not willing to assist Israel in offensive strikes against Iran. It might seem like a fine difference to a bunch of people, and it's also very clear. I don't think the Iranian mullahs care that much, but that's the U.S. position. Look, chances are Iran will respond some way. On the other hand, Iran has had a lot of embarrassments in the last, 2 to 3 years. Not just the beeper operation, not just the strikes on all of their things, not just, they've managed to lose a lot of guys. And you kind of wonder, Israel just seems to have penetrated almost all of their key security organizations. There was a report that one of the Iran Revolutionary Guard Corps leaders defected to Israel, and that's how they knew where all these guys were going to be meeting through this. This may escalate. On the other hand, if you're Iran, this conflict is off to a terrible start, and you kind of wonder about whether they'll be able to make a They will. They'll probably do something to save face, but it's kind of hard to see what Iran can do other than through some sort of terrorist strike.
Yeah, it seems like they've got at least one limb tied behind their back now as this thing gets started. I also found it interesting, Jim, this morning that people are saying, Iran could attack directly or they could use their proxies against Israel, like you said. Well, Hamas is degraded significantly. I think it was Hezbollah this morning saying, you know what, we're not going to be doing this. So
Hezbollah's in a rebuilding year. It's it's a lot of losses in the last year. Trying to bring up new talent. They did well in the terrorist draft, but otherwise it's not the all of Iran's proxies, including the Houthis, who said they're not going to strike U.S. Shipping anymore. It'll be interesting to see who's willing to sign on for another fight against Israel and the terrible Zionist state after because everybody's tangled with Israel so far, and everybody's come away licking their wounds.
The terrorism business is struggling right now, which is good. But in your business, they say you can have better, cheaper, or faster, but you only get to pick two. But what if you could have all three at the same time? Well, that's exactly what Cohere, Thomson Reuters, and Specialized Bikes have since they upgraded to the next generation of the cloud, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. Right now, with zero commitment, you can try OCI for free at oracle.com/martini.
OCI is the blazing fast platform for all of your infrastructure, database, application development, and AI needs, where you can run any workload in a high availability, consistently high performance environment and spend less than you would with other clouds.
It's faster, it's cheaper, it's better, and this is the cloud built for AI and all your biggest workloads. So right now, with zero commitment, try OCI for free. That's oracle.com/martini, oracle.com/martini. That's oracle.com/martini. All right, Jim, moving away from the Middle East and all the events of last night with Israel and Iran, we go back to, like I said at the beginning, what probably would have been our biggest story of the day. Yesterday, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem was in Los Angeles holding a press conference discussing the riots, the federal response to the riots and all that. California Senator Alex Padilla shows up. He's not in a suit, as far as we could tell, not wearing a pin, and he decides to interject into the press conference.
To insert into the city. So I want to say thank you to every single person that has been able to do this.
Hands up.
Also, I want to talk
I'm Senator Alex Padilla. I have questions for the Secretary, because the fact of the matter is a half a dozen violent criminals that you're rotating on your
I also want to talk about specifically.
So now he's being taken into custody, pushed out in the hallway, and now he's about to be handcuffed.
Go ahead, behind my back. All right.
Cool. Good hand. Lay flat. Lay flat.
Other hand, sir. Other hand.
There's no recording loud out here.
So, Jim, the Democrats are apoplectic about this. Chuck Schumer was talking about it on the Senate floor. Pretty much every other Democrat very, very upset about this. The argument from the FBI, which was part of the arrest along with the Secret Service, the Homeland Security Department, obviously saying, look, we didn't know who this guy was. There's been a lot of unrest, targeted agents, and all of a sudden, this guy who doesn't identify himself before he starts moving towards the secretary and pushing back against the security, we had no choice but to do that. And, it's only then that he identified himself. So what's your take on all this?
Clearly, he wanted to force a confrontation. Clearly, he wanted the attention. He wanted someone. You can tell his staff is thrilled that he was getting arrested. And I am sure that probably around 6, 7, 8 p.m. Eastern yesterday, they're like, this is fantastic. Senator Padilla is going to be the biggest story all through the weekend. And then Israel and Iran blew up like that. But so clearly he wanted it. Once he was out in the hallway, you kind of wonder if he needed to be forced onto the ground in handcuffs. But again, FBI and Homeland Security folks are doing their jobs, and they don't know who this guy is. Now, what I did notice, I think is weird, what jumped out at me, Greg, if Gavin Newsom had walked into that room, do you think it shakes out the way it does?
No.
All right. If Adam Schiff walks into that room, does it shake out the way it does?
Probably not.
Adam Schiff was on television almost every minute of Trump's first term, right? Everybody knows who Adam Schiff is. And I'll just go down the list of other California politicians. Kamala Harris.
Same.
No way it goes down that way. Karen Bass.
Same.
Presuming she could find it, Maxine Waters. Maybe it goes down that way. Maybe they just say Mad Max seems that dangerous. Like, there are a bunch of California officials who are very widely recognizable, and that they walk into a room, they're probably not going to get mistaken by, is this some random crazy guy who's in here who wants to attack the secretary? Senator Padilla was on the LA City Council for almost 7 years. Then he went to the California State Senate for 8 years, was California Secretary of State for 6 years, and he's been a U.S. Senator since January 2021. No, but does Kristi Noem react, Senator, what are you doing here?
No.
I would love to give a lineup of middle-aged Latino men in suits and say, Secretary Noem, pick out Senator Padilla from this crowd, right? I don't know if she does. All of her entourage does not say, oh, hey, it's Senator Alex Padilla, right? No one in the security. Also, this is happening in the Los Angeles Federal Building. This guy has been in LA politics his entire life. Nobody recognizes him? Like, that's astonishingly low profile. I like that. That is an amazing thing that nobody recognized. Now, again, we're used to seeing lawmakers in suits, and he's dressed very casually, like he's out to, go shopping at Whole Foods or something. So, like, maybe some of it's that, but it just kind of seemed exceptionally weird. And I think it says something about him that he goes and he causes this ruckus, and no one in the room says, hey, why is Senator Alex Padilla doing this? And he's shouting, I'm Senator Alex Padilla, I'm Senator Alex. How many people in that room recognize that Alex Padilla was a senator? How many people in that room recognize that Alex Padilla was their senator if they're California? Like, keep in mind, again, this is the LA federal office. This can't be the first time he goes into this building, but nobody has no idea who he is. Am I taking crazy pills? Does this seem really weird to anybody else?
Well, it seems weird to me because you and I are pretty much political junkies. And if 2 days ago you had said, what does Alex Padilla look like? And given that same test, I would have failed it. I knew that was the name of the other senator from California because he was appointed to replace Kamala when she became vice president, then won another term. But I've never seen him actually do anything. But what I'm just getting a good laugh out of is the martyrdom that the liberal press is issuing here. You got the LA Times with the headline, first they came for the immigrants, then they took down our Latino senator. It's not like they put him on a plane to Mexico or Venezuela or something. And then the New York Times, Padilla's scuffle stirs painful memories of a childhood spent proving his worth. I don't think you get those if the roles are reversed, Jim. Just a hunch.
Greg, I just got to start by saying this was not the topic in Martini that I expected the term martyrdom to come up today. And secondly, when it comes to being a longtime U.S. senator, active in politics, and people having no idea who you are, Senator Padilla, Tim Kaine knows exactly how you feel. For our listeners, Tim Kaine was Hillary Clinton's running mate, is a current senator from Virginia, something I need to remind people of every time we mention him, because no one could remember him at all. It's as if he's been erased from our memory with one of those neuralizers from Men in Black.
Yeah. And it's just like Newsom the other day saying, oh, I really hope Trump doesn't have me arrested. So these people want the attention.
Yeah. Could you imagine? I am skeptical of the notion that Gavin Newsom will be the Democratic nominee. But if Trump arrested him, maybe. That's a credential on a Democratic debate stage that very few people. Although, you know what? By 2028, maybe a whole bunch of Democrats will be arrested.
After he was handcuffed, he presented his ID. They let him go. And Noem and Padilla actually had what they said was a 15-minute meeting. They exchanged numbers to keep, allegedly, the dialogue open. Yeah. So, there are right ways to do this and there are wrong ways to do this. If your goal is to have a meaningful discussion, you take plan B. Plan A is to get attention for yourself. And it's just like the Congresswoman from New Jersey. If you just show up at the gate and say, hi, I'd like to meet with the officials here, instead of, getting into an altercation with them, things usually go better. But that's not what they want.
If you act like Code Pink, you're going to get treated like Code Pink.
It's a good way to sum it up. So, Jim, quite an end to the week. We'll see what the situation is overseas and domestically on Monday. See you then.
See you Monday, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Please be sure to subscribe to our podcast. If you don't already, tell your friends about us as well. We'd love to have them listening. Thank you also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Greg Corombos. Have a terrific weekend and join us again on Monday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.